So what I'm hoping to do is give you some new things that you've never heard before. And I'm going to read that every night. Okay. So the question I dealt with last time was the dinosaurs, what are they, how are they getting about? This time it's something different. It's the so-called ape-men. Come on, where are you? There's no further. Okay, forward again. Okay, is there any scientific indication that you were an ape, that is, the human transformation? And you're going to hear this so many times that, we got Lucy, the famous transition, Australopithecus, Afarensis, and so forth. Well, I'm going to go way beyond Lucy today. The idea of evolution, the basic idea of evolution, which is what you're going to hear in most schools, on TV and all over the place, is that everything started out disorganized. At the very beginning, there was one living thing that accidentally came into existence, and as time went on, it made copies and mistakes, which were called mutations. After a while, now we have a second living thing, a second different type, and then a third type, and a fourth type, and a fifth type. So, from the very beginning, there would have been, from the very beginning, there would have been one type of living thing, and then it would have expanded and become more and more different types. So one way to put that would be simple to complex. Life started out simple and became more complex. That is, at the very beginning it was disorganized, and later on it became more and more organized, more and more complex. Now creation is the opposite concept. People say, well, who's to say God didn't use evolution? If you understand the meaning of the term, that automatically tells you evolution is simply complex, creation is complex and simple. This would say, according to the Bible, that at the very beginning, everything was at its maximum of complexity. At the end of the creation week, God looked around and said, it's very good. That it was the best it was ever going to be, and ever since then, things have deteriorated. They may have diversified a lot, too. For instance, if you get one pair of wild dogs out in the woods and you start breeding, you can eventually kill owls and griffins and so forth, but they're all still dogs. So you're not gaining any genetic information yet. So evolution is simply complex, creation is complex and simple. If one's true, the other one has to be false. So there are a lot of things in nature, a lot of living things that have similar features. You have 2 arms and 2 legs, gorillas have 2 arms and 2 legs, dogs have 4 legs, and so forth. Well, why is that? If everything started as a result of this one original simple thing, then groups that are not considered closely related must have acquired similarities either due to common ancestors, or else there was a long series of parallel mutations where, look at that, this thing is developing this other thing, it's also developing the same feature. So, some interesting things about that is if you ever go fishing down by the Gulf of Mexico, there are these fish that look like rocks. And there's also oysters. And the fish is called an oyster fish. So the oyster just happened to gradually acquire mutations over millions of years that made it look like a rock. And the fish acquired mutations over millions of years that made it look just the same as the oyster, but it's a fish, not an oyster. So evolution says it's either common ancestry or parallel mutations, and it's all random chance. Creation says instead, no, similarities in groups that are not considered closely related, but it's in different kinds. In Genesis, we read about God creating different kinds. Things of different kinds that have similarities, we would say, well, that's because of common design. God knew what he wanted, and so he put these features. Why did God do things the way he did? The answer is, we don't know. We just did. But the Bible says that this whole universe was created for his pleasure. Okay. He has the right to do what he wants. So if you remember last time, I dealt with the question of how do you know things? We're going to deal with how do you know whether creation or evolution is correct. Well, how do you know things? You may know because you see it with your senses. See it with your senses. Or you may know because some authority that you decide to trust told you. Or you may know because you figured it out logically and you hope you're doing proper logic. Or you may know because your intuition, your gut feeling, well, that may be correct, but I'm not going to trust your intuition, you shouldn't trust mine. And then people will say they know just based on wishful thinking or lying, like, a poker game. You deliberately try to make the other person think this is what I have in my hand, when you know you don't, so you bluff. But the ones that may potentially be valid is going to be your senses, a reliable authority, logic, and maybe your intuition. But your intuition has nothing to do with science. So, who can tell us for sure that humans came from apes? Is there any living person that actually saw that? Nope. Are there any eyewitness accounts written down of humans evolving from apes? No. Why couldn't there be? Yeah, because they were monkeys and apes. They don't know how to write. And so even if it did happen, it couldn't be written down. Now, of course, there is an account that claims to be the account of creation, the Bible. So people that reject the Bible, they're automatically going to have to say, no, forget it. Well, how could they know what happened in the beginning? They have to figure it out through logic. So when somebody says the earth is 4.56 billion years old, how do they know that? Through logic. Somebody came up with a test on a meteorite that hit the ground in Arizona, the Canyon Diablo meteorite, and this guy invented a new technique where he said, let me compare these two forms of lead. It's 4.56 billion years old. Well, whatever is wrong about that? Then everything else on the earth that depends on that one age is also wrong. And I'm not going to get into carbon dating today. That's a separate topic in itself, but when we say that this thing lived that long ago and that long ago and that long ago, nobody was there. It's all logic, and I would say that it's false logic. But the most fundamental thing, if you're going to try to figure out something logically, you start with certain premises. You start with certain premises, presuppositions, axioms, postulates, different word for it. You start with certain things that you just accept this must be true. Has to be true. Why? Because it just has to. So, for instance, Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence, he said, we're going to logically prove to you that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Did he say that? No, he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. He didn't say I'm going to try to prove this. He said, I just accept it, and you should too. So there are certain things that you accept if you want to believe in evolution. There's contrast in things that you accept if you believe in creation. If you want to believe in evolution, the basic idea is natural process only. No supernatural process. Not one single thing is beyond the range of natural explanation. And here's some of the people that have pointed at that. Darwin himself, when he wrote the Argument of Species, you don't know who Darwin was, Charles Darwin? Wasn't he the first person to write a book about evolution itself? Yeah, the idea has been around for a long time, but Darwin's the first one who wrote a book. It's called The Argument of Species. He said it could be demonstrated that any complex organism which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive part modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. So admit it, I have natural processes on it. If you ever let God in at any one point, how do you know he didn't step in at any other point? And then there was a doctor writing to Nature magazine in 1999, Dr. Scott Todd, he said a similar thing. He said, I'm going to admit that, don't confuse me with the facts. Even if all the data don't prove intelligence is on it, such a hypothesis is excluded from science because it's not naturalistic. If you can't explain it by natural processes, I won't believe it. And then, way back in 1929, Dr. Watson wrote an article in Nature magazine, and he talked about the theory of evolution itself as a theory of the universe that accepted not because it can be proved biologically coherent evidence to be proven because the only alternative, sexual creation, is clearly incorrect. If you refuse to believe in any sort of God, you have to believe in evolution. So if you say, I believe in evolution, what you're saying is absolutely everything must be explainable by natural processes. If you believe in creation, you would say some things may not be explainable by natural processes. Origin of matter, energy, the origin of life, and so forth. Can you prove either one? No. You weren't there. So you just say, which one makes more sense to me? You look around at nature and you say, you know, I see a lot of stuff that it makes sense to me that there was an intelligence involved, not just natural process. You can't prove it. People challenge you, prove creation. I'm not going to prove evolution. Prove there's God. He does not. It's just something you can say, this makes sense to me. So now, what's the big deal for Christians? Well, according to evolution, we had a long series from the first living thing that came into existence. We got more and more and more highly evolved. We had a long series of things that were getting more and more monkey-like and more ape-like. And so finally, the first two of them, oh yeah, there's a male, there's a female. But along the way each one evolved is out-competing the others around it. That is, in order for the strong to survive, the weak have to die. So the process of struggle and death going on for millions and millions and millions of years, and as a result of death, all evolution died out, and finally, humans came along. So, in a sense, death and struggle finally led to the existence of humans. Is that what the Bible says? No, definitely not. It says, through one man sin entered the world, which sin came death. So, humans were the direct cause of death and struggle. So people say, well, who should say God did use evolution? The Bible says God did use evolution. And then, who is Jesus? Well, I'm a Christian. I'm trusting Jesus completely for my eternal destiny. I'm trusting Him to get me out of hell, so that I won't go to hell, so that I'll go to heaven to be with Him and with God the Father. Okay, that's what I'm believing. But who is Jesus? The Bible tells us, 1 Corinthians chapter 15, for since by man came death, which man was that? That sounds terrible. So, since by man came death, by man came also the resurrection of the dead. For as in Adam all died, even so in Christ shall all be made alive. There's a contrast between Adam and Christ. And further on the same chapter. And so it is written, the first man Adam was made a living soul, the last Adam was made a quickening, a life-giving spirit. So who is the last Adam? Jesus. So we got the first Adam brought sin and death, the last Adam undid that. He brought righteousness and resurrection. So the Bible says he's the last Adam, but evolution says there was no first Adam. Well, if there was no first Adam, what did he need the last Adam for? What did Jesus die for? Something that never happened. I am not willing to accept that. I believe since Jesus is the last Adam, there had to be a first Adam. Okay, so we hear all these millions and millions and millions of years ages with geologic time scale, and I'm focusing on primates. Primates are monkeys, apes, humans, lemurs, stuff like that. Okay. So those are found in rock layers from the Eocene and upward to the Holocene, which is also called the Recent. In the lower layers, you don't find any primates. The very first primates are found in the Eocene. So these ages are based on the assumption that evolution took place, and that it took place very slowly, steadily, and gradually. If there was a worldwide flood, that can explain it, if not all of the labels. This is what evolution is founded upon. First, we say absolutely everything is natural processes only. Can't allow anything but natural processes. Well, second, we've never seen things evolving. Within recorded human history, which goes back to 4,000 years or so, we've never seen anything evolve from one major type to another major type, but because of our first assumption, it had to happen. Well, what's the explanation? We've never seen it happen, but it had to happen. It must just be a very, very, very slow process. Why don't we have any fossils? Because the process was too slow. So this is what the Bible warned us about 1,000 years ago. And then Peter wrote this down. This is all about theology. Anyway, the foundation of evolution, if you ever took a theology class, is something called uniformitarianism. That means you gotta wear a uniform. It means that everything happens at uniform rate. Can I have some water, please?
Absolutely.
Everything happens at slow, steady, gradual, uniform rates. And this is what Peter told us. First of all, you must understand this. This is Peter chapter 6. First of all, you must understand this, that scoffers will come in the last day, and of course, scoffers are what? Very good. Okay, they make fun. Okay, scoffers will come in the last day, they're scoffing, following their own tactics. Okay, the scoffers are going to make fun of us believers, thank you, by saying several things. Number one, where's the promise of his coming? That is, Jesus is not literally coming back to earth. Now, even if you say, well, maybe God is evolution, you say spiritually going to come to earth. But the Bible tells us that Jesus is literally coming to earth. He's going to set foot on Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. I was over in Jerusalem a few years ago, and my tour group took us up to the top of the Mount of Olives, and the leader of the group was a Messianic Jewish Christian, and they were doing negotiations. The Catholic Church owns the real estate at the top of the Mount of Olives. So his group was doing negotiations about maybe leasing the top of the Mount of Olives. Okay. The very fact that the Catholic Church entered into negotiations is kind of interesting because suppose you think Jesus is going to come back and set foot in your yard. Would you lease your yard to somebody else? No, they don't believe he's literally coming back. So the first thing scoffers are going to say, where's the promise of his coming? He's not literally coming back. The second thing they'll say, since the fathers fell asleep, all things have continued as they were from the beginning of creation. That is, things happen slowly, steadily, gradually, same rate. And then just so you know that this fisherman is talking about theology in the last days, the next sentence says, they, the scoffers, deliberately ignore this fact that by the word of God having existed long ago, and earth formed out of water, and by means of water, through which the world has then existed, was deluged with water and earth. So the third thing the scoffers are going to say is no flood. Jesus is not literally coming back, everything's always happening the same way, no flood. Peter said, look out for this. Well, the whole idea about building up all these millions and millions and millions of years is based on something called superposition. A few years ago, I was teaching in earth science class, and I went over this superposition means things are superposed, one on top of another. On the exam, I asked the question, what does superposition mean? And one of the students said, some positions are too good, so good they're superpositions. Yeah, well, ready for public school. So anyway, the arrangement of layers that you can see on a geologic chart like I showed you, it's fairly consistent worldwide. But there's hundreds of exceptions where the strata that are supposed to be older are actually on top of the ones that are younger. So the ages assigned depend upon something that a guy 400 years ago, Nicholas Siano, came up with called the law of superposition. It said an undisturbed rock strata is the oldest rock at the bottom. How many years but they're not disturbed? The problem is what if they are disturbed? If there was never a worldwide flood, did the rocks just kind of settle down slowly? No, if you have any experience with floods, the water going all over the place. So it's not a law, or the law of superposition, but if you ever find an exception to the law, it's not a law. There have been experiments done at the University of Colorado and also at Mount St. Helens showing that if there's any kind of a current at all bets are off. You can't be sure about the order of deposition. And if there was a worldwide flood, you're going to have a lot of this stuff. Now, in general, what you find is the creatures in this heavier Saharan layer, and in the Cambrian, Ordovician, Silurian, and Devonian are the kind of things you find living at the depths of the ocean, gradually moving their way up and up and up toward the shore. and then you get to the Permian, and that's going to be right around the shoreline, and that's going to be a lot of activities. That's what you expect, and that's what we find. Now, once you get on land, it's totally different. The secret is they're just going to get buried by the rising water and all of a sudden. On the land, you figure probably everything lives in a certain environment, certain ecological community, but there will probably be a lot of exceptions because some things can get away from being buried longer. For instance, primates, monkeys, apes, humans, smarter, able to run, able to float for a while, and so if you survive the longest, you're less likely to leave a fossil record. So, what do the strata mean? The rock layers. Well, they're contrasting groups. Now, fossils are often found in large groups. In fact, in one place in South Africa where I've been, at the Karoo supergroup, it's estimated there's hundreds of billions of vertebrates. Will be amphibians. Hundreds of billions. That's a lot. How many fossils will it take to draw reasonable conclusions about what happened? 10? Yeah. 100? Yeah. 1,000? Yeah. 10,000? Not billion? Well, 10,000, 100,000, maybe you can start drawing reasonable conclusions. How about a million? Yeah, okay. How about 10 million? 100 million? A billion? 10 billion? 100 billion? We've got at least hundreds of billions of fossils. We ought to be able to draw some reasonable conclusions from that. So, there are many large-scale fossil graveyards, not just Karoo, but all over the place, like Dinosaur National Monument up in Colorado. And I can't be worried about how to go to big dinosaurs this summer in case anybody's interested. Okay, so initial complexity, which is creation, says that those strata, they're identified by a community of fossils. They were probably formed under catastrophic conditions. There's a great deal of dirt, a great deal of black sediment was deposited, and violent events, Noah's flood, and maybe other things too like that. So the groups of fossils, I would think, represent ecological communities. They're called fleets of fossils. Like when you have a fleet of hotel rooms. The initial disorganization, which is evolution, says that the dirt, the sediment is deposited a tiny bit at a time over millions of years, and eventually hardens the rock. And uniformitarianism says there's never been a worldwide flood. Standard law of superposition says that the layers on the bottom have to be the oldest, so therefore, fleets of fossils actually represent common groups instead of ecological communities, according to evolution. So if there really had been a worldwide flood, what did we expect to find? Billions and billions of victims in rock layers laid down by water all over the whole earth, even on top of our highest mountains. What do we actually find? Billions and billions of victims in rock layers laid down by water all over the whole earth, even on top of our highest mountains. Stand in front of a mirror and practice everything. So, how do we identify that a rock layer is Cambrian, that it's Devonian, that it's Jurassic? It's by the fossils it contains. You don't use any kind of radiometric data. You look for a characteristic group of fossils, which is called a suite of fossils. So rather than using radioactive data, the geologists identify each layer by a clearly defined suite of fossils. So if evolution is correct, we have one living thing, and eventually it mutated. Now we've got two types. Oh, one went that way, one went that way. These are mutated, some went that way, some went that way, some went that way, some went that way. You can have different types all over the world because evolution would occur at different rates, at different times, in different places. So you shouldn't see any worldwide pattern of clearly defined groups of fossils. Because that's exactly how we identify rock layers. I think it's a whole lot more compatible with theory and with evolution. And you can see a wonderful example of communities of living things down off the coast of Cuba, the Grand Cayman Islands. There's four distinct communities of fossils, not fossils, they're living things. And they lived at the same time, but not in the same place. So they're just right next to each other. One is in shallow water, and a bit deeper, then a bit deeper, then a bit deeper. I think this matches very nicely what we see in the fossil record, communities of fossils that would have been living at different levels, at least in the ocean. Well, when you look through the Earth's geologic layers, what you're going to find is a clearly defined community of fossil, identifying Jurassic, Triassic, Cretaceous, and so forth. Now let's get back to apes. The Bible says humans evolved from lower life forms, right? The Bible, no, the Bible says
It doesn't say
the
that.
first human being, the first man, did not have parents. He was formed from the dust of the earth. And then the first female human being was not from parents. She was taken in a miraculous cloning operation where God took one of his ribs and built it up into a second human being, female. But if Adam had not sinned, he would have lived forever. That's what the Bible says. You might not like it, but that's what it says very plainly. On another hand, if you have people that believe God used evolution, called theistic evolution, they say God started things off, and he was up in heaven watching, and I guess he just liked seeing things continue and die. And so he waited and let things evolve. So after billions of years, after billions of years, you have the very first things that we call primates. And then after a long time, then okay, the first anthropoids. And then after, millions more years, the first things that were called hominoids, which is like apes. And then the first things that were called hominids, which are the apes that are similar to humans, and finally humans. So God's watching from heaven. He says, okay, evolve. Not quite. Let's wait about another 100,000 years. And okay, that's enough. You're out. Well, that's what you believe if you believe in theistic evolution. Now, on the other hand, atheistic evolution says, forget it, there's no God. This is all unnatural. Okay, some of the things about the creation account in Genesis, where it said that God made the first male body, Adam, in the dust of the earth. That's ridiculous, isn't it? What are you made out of? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur, phosphorus, and about 18 or 20 other elements. Where's the good place to get it?
Dirt.
The dirt. In fact, what happens is the plants go out and extract them from the dirt and put them in one location and use the plants. But they were in the dirt originally. And then, how many of you ever heard people say men have one less rib than women? That is ridiculous. Okay, God did an operation on Adam. He took a rib out, didn't affect his DNA. I had my tonsils out some years back. Would that mean that my sons would be born without tonsils, but my daughters would still have tonsils? That's the same thing. You take one rib out, it's not going to affect the DNA. All of the kids are going to have the normal number of ribs. And besides that, you know what the only bone in the human body that will grow back? Yeah, right. So he probably had his ribs back by the time he was old. Okay, so now, if we came from apes, we could think logically, if we evolved from some ape-like ancestors who would have taken millions of years, so we should find a great many fossils of transitional stuff which we call ape-men. That's if we evolved. On the other hand, if we were created as humans and apes were created as apes, we should find a total lack or absence of ape-men in fossil records. Now, people are going to tell you that we've got all of these ape-men, we can look at some of them. Here's a good question. If humans evolved from apes, why are they still apes? Well, the evolutionists would say, well, it's because we didn't evolve from any of the living apes. We evolved as the living apes evolved that way. Okay, well then where are their ancestors, the living apes? Do we have anything leading up to them? This is how primates are classified. You have two major groups. One is called the prosimian, that's lemurs, lorises, tarsiers, aye-ayes, bush babies, and some extinct forms. Okay. Then there's also a group called the anthropoids. That's a big group. That includes tarsiers, it includes New World monkeys, the New World being what? No? New World versus Old World monkeys.
The New World is like that's what the Europeans call the Western Hemisphere.
The New World monkey is South American monkey, and Old World monkey is African Asian monkey. And then within the group of African Asian monkeys, we have a whole bunch of monkeys, baboons and so forth, and we also have apes, and we also have people like that that dress up in monkey suits. So that's how primates are broken down. All right. There are presently 7 billion people living in the world, approximately. And so you take all the people up to now, there's probably been 10, 14 billion people living since the beginning. Well, there's a lot more monkeys than there are humans. And since the beginning, there would have been a lot more monkeys and apes than there are humans. So compare the number of fossils found of things that are supposed to be human ancestry, monkeys and apes, to the number that have lived. Okay. If we had, say 20 billion monkeys and apes, we could have a lot of fossils, right? Leading up to it. But it's been said that all of the fossils leading up to humans would fit in a single coffin or would fit on a single pool table, billiard table. Now, this was written 27 years ago, so now when you take 2 coffins, we would take 2 pool tables. But out of all of these tens of billions of things that have lived, we don't find any fossils. Hardly any fossils at all. So, Dorfman said in Science Digest, for all their painstaking efforts to trace the origins of man, the oil anthropologists, who are studying fossil finds, have collected only 3,000 bones. Wait, if we've got tens of billions of individuals, why don't we have a few thousand bones? All of these family trees that you see are based on a few thousand bones, which is probably from at most a few hundred individuals. So why are there so few fossil primates? According to evolution, fossilization occurs as an animal dies next to a river or lake, where it falls in, it's covered by sediment, and eventually the sediment becomes mineralized, it becomes hardened to rock, and then eventually there's erosion and it's exposed again. So very few primates they die in the right place at the right time in order to turn into fossils. Well, creation says something very different. It says that the vast majority of the fossil record is a result of Noah's flood. And so the creatures that were able to avoid being buried the longest would have the least fossils. And primates are more mobile and more intelligent, and we can figure out what to do to get away from being buried for the longest time. So primates would be expected to leave the worst fossil record according to the idea of Noah's flood. Now, there may have been some primates buried in local forest layers. Some of the Pleistocene fossils, a lot of the cyclones, that may have been after Noah's flood, but most or all of humans were still concentrated around tables, so there's very few human fossils. Very few human fossils. Okay, so I showed you guys this last time. People think it takes millions and millions and millions of years for something to turn into a fossil. Last time I was here, I showed you guys my fossilized spark plugs from Durban, South Africa. Well, there have been a bunch of experiments done with chicken bones, and it only takes maybe 5 to 10 years to turn a chicken bone into a good fossil under the right conditions of heat, pressure, and mineral. And likewise, organic garbage like banana peels and grass and so forth, which can turn into crude oil, which is called fossil fuels, and as little as 20 minutes. So it doesn't take a long time to turn into fossils, and then the minerals can coat things very quickly. Those are the Flintstone spark plugs. But those are the spark plugs my friend Joshua Gilbert got out of the harbor in Durban, South Africa. It takes about 5 years to form a heavy coating mineral. Okay, so back to the primates. On the evolutionary time scale, primates are found from the Eocene and upward. And they're actually found in distinct groups. It doesn't just gradually blur where we got them all at the same time. No, Eocene is a certain group, Oligocene is a different group, Miocene is a different group, Pliocene is a different group. So we tend to think that we come from monkeys. No, not all primates are monkeys. In fact, the ones that are considered the lowest are the lemurs and the lorises and eyes, and a gelato. Rubber son, they're so cute.
I know.
And then the gelato with the car seats. So what are lemurs like? What do they like? They like to move it.
You got that dramatic aspect, don't you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. From the fun side of it.
Yeah, it's the fun side.
Okay, so they're cute, but they're not monkeys and they're not apes. Now, the funny thing about them is they all sort of appear in the fossil record complete. And this is supposedly 55 million years ago. And oh, look at that, we got our first lemur, our first loris, our first tarsiers. And they don't gradually evolve from anything. What's their ancestor? Nothing. The layer underneath the Eocene is called the Paleocene. There are no fossil primates in the Paleocene. There's a fair number of fossil primates in the Eocene, but they're all lemur, lorises, and tarsiers. There's no monkeys, there's no apes. So what's their ancestor? I don't know. But, we found fossils of these things, and yeah, that's like the living form. They didn't evolve in 57 million years. These are some of the fossils. These are actually some of the more complete fossils. Out of all of those tens of billions of fossil primates, I told you we only have a few thousand bones. We have less than 10 complete skeletons out of at least 10 billion individuals. Less than 10 complete skeletons. The most complete one is a lemur called Darwinius maximus, and another one is a lemur called Merthopsis. This one is supposedly a transition to humans from some other ape-like creature. It's like 40% complete. A Kembo, a proconsul, is also only about 40% complete. Australopithecus sativa, not very complete. Homo naledi, we got a whole bunch of fossils that were jumbled together, and so people pick through the bones and arrange them to try to form skeletons. We don't know they all came from one individual, but I'm saying out there we got a fairly complete skeleton. Oreopithecus, found in a box of Oreo, found in Italy. It's fairly complete. I think it's like 60% complete. It's an Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy, it's less than 40% complete. But these are the most complete fossil skeletons of a primate in the whole world. I'm meaning not humans. The answer also we have complete fossil form. They're humans in every way. Okay, so the classification of the primates, move on, would require there had to be some kind of an ancestor connecting in the Paleocene from insectivores to the primates. So the problem is the first primates and the first insectivores occur in the same layers, like right next to each other. And then what would the transition from insectivore to primates? We don't have anything. Okay, what's the common ancestor of all primates? We don't have anything. What's the common ancestor of lemurs and lorises and tarsiers and bush babies and all that? We don't have anything. The higher primates, which are the monkeys and apes. What's the common ancestor of the old world monkeys, the new world monkeys? We don't have anything. What's the common ancestor of apes? We don't have anything. What's the common ancestor of the Asian apes, which would be orangutans and gibbons? We don't have anything. What's the common ancestor of the African apes and humans? We don't have anything. What's the common ancestor of the African apes? We don't have anything. Actually, gorillas and chimpanzees have no fossil record. There's other things that this bone kind of reminds us of a gorilla, but we only got the top half of one skull. That's how ancient it is. There's something that kind of reminds us of a chimpanzee, but we only have part of a skull. Most of the time, the fossils are either separated teeth or maybe broken fragments of the jawbone with a few teeth. Sometimes you get a skull. Every now and then you have a skull with a partial jawbone nearby, and we put them together. Every now and then, rarely, we have maybe an arm bone or a leg bone. We never have a complete skeleton except for Merthopsis and Darwinius. Nothing. Most of these skeletons. So monkeys. There's two major types of monkeys. You have the old world monkey, which is going to be African and Asian. Their nostrils point downwards, so if you go to oral rhinolaryngologist, the rhine has to do with nose. A rhinoceros means nose horn. So when you see the rhine, that has to do with the nostrils. So the old world monkeys have nostrils that point downward, and their tails are not used for climbing, grasping, or anything like that, just for balance. There's 24 genera of old world monkeys in the world today. So you probably have seen some of these, the drills and the drills. On day drill, we're going to have a fire drill. They would tell us, okay, tomorrow we got a fire drill, exactly. So I have a tie that has a picture of a drill. It looks like that with a colorful face. And when the thing goes up, I tell everyone, this is a drill. Oh, speaking of that sort of thing, is anybody willing to guess who this is on my time?
Looks like gorillas and
Before you're close, it's the gorilla migraines. The gorilla migraines. The girl of my dreams, the gorilla of my dreams.
Ah, I get it.
And the new world monkeys have nostrils instead of pointing downward, they point sideways. These are called the catarrhs. And some of these do have tails they use as if it were an extra arm or hand or something. There are 5 families with 15 genera, so there's about 39 genera of monkeys living in the world today. So you guys have probably all seen the marmosets and the tamarins and squirrel monkeys and so forth. Those are all New World monkeys. So the largest New World monkey is called the Bourdieu in South America. And then look at the little guy up there. They're commonly called a finger monkey or a pocket monkey. They're taking marmosets or wrap around his finger. They're putting pocket. They're so cute. And then the largest old world monkey is the mandrill, which is a form of baboon. You don't want to mess with them. They're not quite as big as humans, but they're a whole lot stronger than a human. They can rip you apart if they fell on you. So I was in Zambia, we were going down the road, and there's baboons all around taking through the trash. I said, we don't stop here. Just a
Yeah, my dad had a friend who's from Congo.
Yeah.
He said that when you go to hunt there's baboons, you better just stop seeing them.
Absolutely. They're smart, they're strong, and they work in troops. So you shoot one, you have to stop 50 others. Something like that. There was an old movie in the 1950s called The Sands of the Kalahari Desert in Africa. And the ending scene, this guy challenges the baboon. Big mistake. Don't worry, Sands of the Kalahari. You don't want to watch that. Okay, and then of course the smallest old world monkey is called a california. Not as small as the finger monkey, but still, it's pretty small. It's cute. Okay, so I'm not going to go through all of these details unless you want something to give them a hard test on. The difference between the New World monkeys and the Old World monkeys. But there's definitely different groups. I would say there's different creative kinds of genesis. Because one of the main differences is the number of teeth. All of the old world monkeys and apes and humans have a total of 32 teeth. All of the new world monkeys have a total of 36 teeth, except for marmosets. They have 32. And most mammals, including tarsiers, lemurs, huskies, and so forth, our color vision is based on 2 cone types. I'm sorry, I should rewrite this. Our color vision is based on 2 cone types, but the catarrhs, the old world monkeys, have 3 cone types in the eyes. And then the catarrhs in South America, they all have 2, except our monkeys that have 3. And the girls have an advantage. The females have 3 different types of cones in the eyes, as opposed to the males only have 2. That's not fair. Actually, there was a study done sometime in the past where there are among females some that can see up the color that the rest of us can't. guys are being colorblind, but some of the girls, some of the females, actually can see extra colors. They have the extra rod and cones in their eyes. And so whoever was doing it said, "Come on, find what this is." It turns out there's a very high percentage of women that have the extra stuff among interior decorators. So, yeah, so they look at the house, they know you, it's slightly different shade over there, and I put them to one of those. So, you know, my wife would say, what do you think about this shade for the wall, or this shade for the bathroom? And I said, Nancy, I have 3 words to you. Guys don't care. Anyway, some females have extra sensors so they can see extra stuff. Okay, so here's an obvious difference between the two monkeys. The Monosex, the NWM New World monkey, South American. Monosex, howler monkeys, squirrel monkeys, woodpeas, spider monkeys, baby monosex, tamarins. Those are all New World monkeys. And then the Old World monkeys, the largest one is the mandrill, and the smallest is the california. And I would like to have a nose like that. It's called a proboscis monkey because that's proboscis nose. And the Hamadryas baboon, this was funny. I went to Cambodia, and there's an ancient temple with a carving from about the year 1100. And there's a picture of what looks very much like a dinosaur. So I posted that on Facebook, and somebody said, no, it's just a made-up thing. But there was a picture right above of a Hamadryas baboon, and it had its hair up like that. And when they're aggressive, they puff their hair up, and they will pick up things to use as weapons. So this person said, look at that, you got a lion-like creature waving a sword. No, it was a Hamadryas baboon carrying a stick. This person was looking for something to criticize for. You don't want to mess with the Hamadryas baboon. What's that? Okay, and then the apes. There's a bunch of extinct apes, but in the world today, there's only 2 types of living apes. One is the gibbon, and the cyanide is a variation of the gibbon. Those are the aged lesser apes. They're still apes. What's one of the obvious differences between apes and monkeys? Yeah, apes don't have hair. Okay, and then the Asian great apes, there's only one type here around the planet. The African great apes, you have the gorillas, and 2 hours hair is, I gotta get a haircut because mine does that. I gotta spray stuff on it and slip it down. But I go to my barber and say, okay, I'm tired of looking like a gorilla. And then you also have 2 variations of chimpanzee. The common one, and troglodytes, is called chimpanzee. And there's another one that's a bit smaller. It's and this is the bonobo.
Only in the Congo.
Yeah. You also can go to Ohio and see them in Rio.
Yeah, but they're native to
Right. And they actually walk upright a considerable amount of time, so people will look at fossils and say, this looks like it could have walked upright, it must be a human ancestor. Well, bonobos are not considered human ancestors, and they walk upright a fair amount of time. So, if you compare a bonobo skull to a human skull, it's not much different. But if you compare it to an Australopithecus skull, they're extremely similar. Australopithecus is probably some sort of chimpanzee type. Okay, so Darwinian snatchlet, I mentioned you before. This was announced in 2009. Proof of evolution, 12, 13 years ago. When I saw this, I said, that's illegal. I've seen illegal skeleton before. But National Geographic is doing specials and selling stuffed toys and all that, and making a lot of money. National Geographic is a popular magazine. It's not peer reviewed. If you're a professional scientist to make sure that your stuff is reliable, you run it by your peers. If you're a paleontologist, paleontologist. If you're a physicist, physicist, and so forth. And that's kind of like the gold standard where you decide, yeah, I can trust it. You write up your article, your peers will look at it and try to shoot holes in it, try to find anything you did wrong. If they do, they report back to you, and you either withdraw it or you say, okay, let me modify it, or you defend your position. But National Geographic is not peer reviewed. It's just a popular thing showing cool pictures. So when they put that out, I said, about 6 months later, a peer reviewed article came out somewhere else. It's just a rumor. Of course, that proved evolution, which meant that all of the previous claims that we proved evolution must have been lies. This one was true, until the next one comes along. And then they'll show that this one was a lie. But then that one is true. Okay, so the monkeys. There's the South American monkeys and the Old World monkeys. What's the common ancestor?
Unknown.
Unknown, exactly. So, one thing that's really interesting is, in the fossil record, this reflects how stuff was buried, not necessarily where it lived. But there's one Old World monkey found in South America, 2,000 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. All the rest of the Old World monkeys are in the Old World, except this one. It's a puzzle as to how it got there. The first monkeys and possible apes are in a layer called the Oligocene. Eocene, you have the lemurs and lorises and so forth. The Oligocene, there's a place in Egypt where supposedly there's a number of monkeys. There's a fighting primates like the Gigapithecus. That's in Egypt. It's believed to be an Oligocene monkey. So there's not very many in the Oligocene. Oligo is a prefix that means few. So if you ever hear in political science about an oligarchy, that's where very few people do it. Okay, so Oligocene has very few primates, but it does have some. There's about 4 primates in the Oligocene. So remember, initial disorganization evolution says things are going to gradually spread out. So everything came from common parents. And then as time went on, okay, this group becomes a parent of this, and this becomes a parent of this. So a lot of things are referred to as sister groups. Well, if you believe in creation, you'd expect there's going to be a lot of things that we call sister groups, because everything within one time is related to everything else within one time. But they could diversify. So my example of chihuahuas and great dane could be considered sister breeds. And within the primates, we probably had the Old World monkey kind, the New World monkey kind, this ape kind, a different ape kind, a different ape kind. So each one of them is going to be considered a sister group rather than an ancestor group. Okay, this is a chart that I got from Nature Communications magazine, and they show all of these are considered sisters. Notice there's no name over here, because they don't know the parent. It's sister. Well, that's what creation will do with stuff. You're going to have a whole bunch of different types that are sisters, but they're not an ancestor. Okay, so what time is it?
9:57.
Okay. So, if you look at the geologic record, the Paleocene, Eocene, Oligocene, Miocene, Pliocene, Pleistocene, you're going to see in the Paleocene and below there's no undisputed time. In the Eocene, you have lemurs and other things that are considered on that level, but they're considered the lowest of the planet. Then you find those in the Eocene. What's the transition moving to? Okay, from there to the Oligocene monkeys and apes, what's the transition going between? No more. Okay, so we get the Oligocene monkeys and apes, and then we move up to the Miocene, and you're going to see several dozen different types of extinct monkeys and apes. Remember, there's about 40 genera of monkeys in the world today. So in the fossil record, we have 50 or 60 genera of monkeys and apes. The ancient says we went from complex to simple, which means we're losing things, to the fact that there's fewer in the present than there were in the past, and that we're losing things. which is more compatible with creation. So, in the Miocene, there's several different types of extinct monkeys in Asia. There's also some monkeys that are continuing to the present unchanged. I say a couple of those in there, Theropithecus and Pachyderm and a few others like that. So then we have several dozen different types in the Miocene. Okay. Then we have different types in the Pliocene. You've heard about Australopithecus and probably Ardipithecus. What's the ancestor of Earth? We don't know. There's no known connection between the Miocene age and the Pliocene age. It's different groups. Creation says the rock layers, the suites of fossils represent what? Ecological communities. They're different groups. They don't blend together. They don't evolve from one to another. So what are the fossils that show monkey graves evolving at all? None of it. Primates, as I said before, are among the rarest type of fossils. And I'll show you two fossils and I'll show you two more in the next few minutes. The vast majority is broken apart. So disarticulated, you have a tooth here, a finger bone here. Finger bones are very, very rare. Every now and then you have a fragment of jaw. Those are very, very rare. But many of them are fragments of broken bones, jaws, ribs, and so forth. But the vast majority of primate fossils are teeth. Teeth are the hardest part of your body, and so they tend to last the longest. And there have been a number of cases where somebody found one tooth. And in academia, there's a principle, publish or perish. If you're a professional scientist, a professor at a university, a PhD scientist, you got to publish something. If you don't, you're going to lose your reputation and eventually they're going to get rid of you. They'll take away your tenure and get rid of you. So you've got to keep publishing stuff. There have been a number of cases where somebody needed to publish something and they found one tooth. And they put an entire article of 20 pages based on the description of the one tooth. And going from the one tooth, they'll say this is how one lived, this is how tall it was, this was the way it moved to the trees or on the ground. It's only one tooth. That's been done a number of times. I couldn't tell you how many it was. I probably read at least 40 different articles about fossil primates in doing my research, and at least about 5 of them have been one tooth, basically the whole country. And other times there's been maybe a fragment of jaw or two tissues. Very, very, very seldom do you find a skull or a complete lower jaw, and never do you find a complete skeleton of anything except those two winglet activities. We find some that are maybe 40% complete. So this is one of the ABBASeminar fossils called PwrDirector, and Don Rosselli was named after it. When you discover something, you get the name of it. Who discovered it? All right. Paranthropus indicates something to do with an ape. Pondangia, the place where it was found, had something to do with Ponda. I don't know about Abacus, but Amphipithecus means ape, and Prophyopithecus means ape. That's the total fossil evidence for this thing. Okay, and then there are the only thing we have complete skeletons of is Neanderthals, because they're very good. But then there are a few dozen partial primate skulls that were badly crushed, deformed, distorted, broken apart. A few dozen. Not even the whole head, just the top of the skull. Then this is almost the entire sampling of any of the primates supposedly older than Neanderthals that have not only the upper skull but the lower jaw. So what is that? It's probably, as I cannot there, probably less than about 15 in the whole world where we have a lower jaw attached to the skull. So these are some of the most complete primates of the Miocene. Apemen, which is kind of like the chimpanzee, but we really can't tell. So there's two different, so the nubius, or you read about the nubius, it's found over by the Danube River in Bulgaria. And the nubius will say, oh, this is one of the most complete skeletons we have, about 15% of the skeleton. And then the Australopithecus, we just had that part. Australopithecus, Sahelanthropus, the top of it, that's all we have with Sahelanthropus. The top of it looks a lot like a gorilla, but we can't tell, because we don't have the rest of the body. And Coelopithecus, that's all we have. And it kind of looks like an orangutan, but we can't tell because that's all we got. Australopithecus, this is Prussia. This is in Italy. You don't normally think of that in population in Italy, but in this part of Italy. This one was buried, and remember, these are all buried in water deposited sediment all around the world. This one was buried and crushed into a wall that was turned to stone later, Australopithecus. And they didn't eat Oreos, it's just in the place that they were. Okay, Apemen is similar to that. We have a fair number of Apemen fossils. We don't have any one complete one, but we have a piece here, a piece here, a piece here, a piece here, a piece here. And we kind of piece them together and say, yeah, it's similar. I like the chimpanzee. Apopithecus was an ape. Victoriopithecus is a monkey. And there's a fair number of Victoriopithecus where we don't have a single complete skeleton. We put together this piece and this piece and this piece and this piece. And we put a chart in the book and say, see, we put it in the evolution. So these are some of the names given to the Miocene ape monkeys. Now, memorize these because this is what the text is going to be on later on. Apopithecus, Glyptopithecus, Australopithecus, Iropithecus, Proconsul, Sahelanthropus, Simoleus, and so forth. Well, several of those have been named based on a single tooth. Some of them are based on more than one tooth. Sometimes there's even a jaw fragment. Some even have partial skulls, but not many. And a very, 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 very few of them included arms, bones, leg bones, or
yeah, so with the skull bone stuff, does that mean the skull is more fragile than the human skull?
Well, they were buried in between dirt, under a lot of heat pressure. So you can tell. This is what they were buried in. And then the vertebra in your back, there's a few individual vertebrae that have been found. So if it's found that these other ones, we put them together and try to figure out what it looks like. No, maybe we're right. Maybe we're not. So the few skeletons that have been mostly complete have all been very useful. So none of them had any connection to either the lower primates of the ABBASeminar or the higher primates of the ABBASeminar. So when somebody finds a tooth, sometimes they make up a whole new name for it. And in all my reading, many times, dozens of times I read this was transferred to the other genus. Well, gee, what biological stuff happened? No, somebody said, no, I think it's just over there back. And somebody created a new genus name, or they created a new species name. Well, at the top level, we have a genus. And then we have the phylum. So we have a backbone, so we call it phylum Chordata. And then we have the class, the mammals, human phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. The kingdom, animal kingdom, chordate phylum, class, mammalia, and then the order is primates. And within the primates, you have the family and the genus and the species. Okay. How do we know that something is the same species as something else? The biological definition of a species is a reproductively isolated group. That is, the members can only reproduce with each other. So we can tell that with living monkeys and apes and dogs and cats and all of that. How are you going to tell from a tooth? Or even a complete skeleton? What kind of breeding experiments can you do with bones? You can't. So people invent or create or transfer a new species because they see some differences between this and the other ones. Well, the one I showed you a few minutes ago, Australopithecus, you read descriptions of ABBASeminar, and they say that it's, they say that, oh, these are the characteristics that they found one. It's a crushed skeleton, and they say, well, all of them were like this. You have no way to know that. It's so badly deformed that some honest people will even say, no, we can't do it. Okay, so let's say we take two human beings, operated down 724, burned for 2 feet, and you bury them and they get fossilized and you dig them up in 1,000 years. And he says, obviously, this is a different genus, certainly at least a different species. No, they're both Homo sapiens. There's a lot of individual variation within any one species and certainly within any one genus. So unless you can do breeding stuff, you really don't know. So you may hear this term later, lumpers and splitters. There are people that are going to put them all together, they're going to lump them together and say, okay, well, they're all this. There are others that say splitters, and so on. Well, this one has a little slight difference in its teeth. So I'm going to call it a different genus. No. I tend to be a lumper, but a lot of the evolutionists, they need something to publish. So they're going to be splitters, and anytime they find even a slight variation, got my publication in, there it is in the Journal of Paleoanthropology or something, so my job is secure for a while. But you can't test. Okay, so all of the transitions leading from anything to anything else are unknown. Let's look at some of the Pliocene primates. So supposedly the Miocene, which is all apes and monkeys, and then we went to the Pliocene, which is different apes and monkeys, and the Pleistocene, which is where humans first appeared. So these include a whole bunch of them that you've probably heard of before, and some of them like Ardipithecus and Australopithecus and Homo erectus. Some of them still exist in the present. And here's Theropithecus, which is a fossil baboon, and here's a living Theropithecus. There's Papio, which is a different kind of fossil baboon. And those are from the Pliocene. But then all of the other ones, like Paranthropus, so the differences between the two skulls, it might be a male and a female. Australopithecus, I'm going to show you a little more about. That is such a deception. So, what are the ancestors of the living ape? Well, some of the proposed things, such as Australopithecus, Ardipithecus, and Anthropus, and so forth, they're supposed to share a common ancestor with the gorillas, the chimpanzees, and so forth. It's called the last common ancestor. So that's something you'll see frequently, the LCA, last common ancestor. Okay, what's the last common ancestor of gorillas and chimpanzees? Unknown. Last common ancestor of orangutans, gorillas, chimpanzees? Unknown. Last common ancestor of Asian apes, including the smaller ones, and the larger ones? Unknown. So, supposedly one of these, Australopithecus and Anthropus, maybe that would be LCA last common ancestor? No. None of those would accept as last common ancestor. So the gibbons first appear in the Miocene in the genus Pliodates, and modern gibbons are the same exact. Cyanide is pretty much the same. There's no known orangutan fossils. None. That one I showed you, Pseudopithecus, is only a part of the skull. And then the African gorillas, chimpanzees, bonobos, there's no known fossil record. No known fossil record of African. I would think that probably they were on Noah's Ark. And after the over, they got out, and the flood was over, they didn't fossil. All we have is living. And then the bonobo is pretty similar to the Australopithecus. But each one of these each one of these, Albicene, Miocene, Pliocene, they're nothing but apes and monkeys within the film involved. There's not a single universally accepted transition from the primates in any of the lower layers to the next higher ones. Not a single one that's universally accepted. Now, somebody may publish an article because they need to publish a parish, but nobody claims that it gets shot down. So the evolutionists believe the transitions existed, but they just weren't preserved. Creationists believe they existed. That's why they get the book. Why would we evolve from those things like this? Has anybody ever heard that there's 98% similarity in the DNA of genes and different genes? It's probably more like 85% similar. So let's go with the 98%. 98% of what? Well, human beings have, in our DNA, there are these chemicals called nucleotides, they work in pairs, they're called base pairs. We have about 3 billion base pairs. Okay? So 2% of 3 billion. If we're only 2% different from the chimpanzee, 2% of 3 billion is 60 million. 60 million mutations would be required to separate us from the chimpanzee. So not just any mutations, but most mutations are harmful. We need beneficial mutations, stuff that's going to do some good. There are a few mutations that benefit individuals, but we've never seen a single one that benefit a species. And certainly none of that is genetic information. Does anybody know about any mutation?
Stoneman disease.
What's that one?
Stoneman disease.
You got one that I don't know. Okay. But what I was going for was sickle cell anemia. For sickle cell anemia, your hemoglobin molecules are normally like the shape of a flattened donut, holding out all over the pigment. But if you get one mutation in the DNA that controls that, it can turn itself around into a sickle cell. And so as it flows through one stream, it can catch on other ones. Very painful condition, lots of intoxicants into the cells where it needs to go. So you say that's totally bad. Well, if you get it from both your parents, it's probably in the case. You get it from one parent, you have a mild case, and you're immune from malaria. Well, malaria is pretty serious disease. My mom had it when she was a little girl. So you can get over malaria. You can never get over sickle cell. So an individual getting the mutation from one of the parents, that individual has a slight benefit. They're not going to get malaria. But the human species, the DNA is damaged. You can get over malaria, you can't get over sickle cell. Another one is there's a type of worm called C. elegans, Anaerobitis elegans. And these things normally live a certain amount of time, but somebody's been able to use an X-ray to induce a mutation. Now they live 3 times as long. Wow, super worm. Yeah, the problem is their rate of reproduction drops. So it may help that one worm live longer, but it messes up the whole species. And then out in the Pacific Ocean, there are windy islands where you got birds, and the birds with the mutation that give shrunk their wings. So they walk around and they'll dive in the water and all of that. And on that island, smaller wings are in the bank. If you have larger wings, you're going to tend to blow off into the ocean. On that island, if you put those birds and the regular birds anywhere else in the world, these guys will starve. So it may help an individual, but it doesn't help the species. No mutations are known to help the whole species. So why would we evolve from this? Well, the wildest amount of time I've seen for the common ancestor between chimpanzees and humans is like 7.5 million years. I don't believe that, but anyway, that's the estimate. So if that's the case, 60 million differences we have to accumulate in 7.5 million years. So that would mean that there has to be an average of about 8 beneficial mutations per year. Okay. But the mutations have to occur in breeding individuals. And some primates breed at older than 10, some at younger. So let's take 10 as an average. So at the breeding age of about 10, from each breeding individual, you have to acquire about 80 beneficial mutations. How many beneficial mutations are known in the whole world? Not critical. But this one individual has got to acquire 80 beneficial. And then you've got to have a girlfriend who acquires exactly the same breeding beneficial mutation. And they can't be the fingers and the nose or anything like that. They have to be in your reproductive cells. So this male has got to acquire 80 endocrine mutations in the reproductive cells. This female has got to acquire most of the same 80 beneficial mutations in her reproductive cells, but a few of them have to be complementary so the reproductive system can still work together. That's one pair. You know, women have to do it about 750,000 pounds in a row. If you ever miss a beat once, evolution stops. So, is this something that seems reasonable? Not to you. Most adult human brains are at least 1,000 cubic centimeters. The smallest ever known was about 750 cc. Okay, there's no ape brain ever that's been discovered that is anywhere near 750 cc. So we're supposedly evolving from a common ancestor shared with apes. If that's the case, you know, evolution, random evolution, should give you a little more capacity, a little more capacity, a little more capacity as time goes on. We should be able to figure out, you know, how to jump across a stream and how to use a stick to get insects and so forth. That's what you should get. As your brain is gradually getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Or maybe even building simple shelters. But there is no biological reason that we should be able to understand the quantum mechanical nature of matter and energy, the fine structure constants of the universe, the real nature of life, the composition of distant stars and so forth. There's no reason you would ever know that. But somehow humans have that potential. Why do we have so much extra brain capacity? So then here are some of the so-called human ancestry contributions. These are now Pleistocene. Australopithecus, there's different variations. There's Afarensis, Robustus, Africanus, but this Paranthropus is another name that's been given to Australopithecus. I went to a museum in South Africa called the Cradle of Humankind Museum, and this is supposedly the best collection of fossils in the entire world, proving in evolution. So I said, all right, let's see what it's about. They have a bunch of individual fossils, this type and this type and this type. There's nothing showing gradual evolution from one to another. It's just different types of apes. So the most complete specimen of Australopithecus is in that museum. It's known as Little Foot. Cradle of Humankind Museum. You go in there to the bathroom, and they have a poster inside of the bathroom door saying you could get involved in our seminars and workshops and find out where you came from and all that. It's just thoroughly saturated. So, possibilities all belong to the same genus. Well, do you look the same as you did when you were a baby? No, it's skull changes, and when you get real old, your skull changes. And then there's also a lot of individual variation within one species, and you've got Andre the Giant, you've got so Paranthropus is just another name for Australopithecus and Zinjanthropus. So the specimen on the left is believed to die while it was young before it had time to develop the protrusions on the left. If you look at the baby chimpanzees, they look a lot different from an adult. It's not the way they develop. So, what about Lucy? You'll probably recognize why this person. I went to Denver to the museum in 1988. Denver Museum in Denver. And Scott, my son, he stood in front of the display of Australopithecus afarensis, Lucy. So there it is. Less than 40% of the squad. And so, some years later, I went back to the same museum and took another picture. The same skeleton in 2008. Look how much more complete it seems. How many more bones did it show? None. And they made it up. It was filled in all the rest based on imagination. And even the feet those are just imaginary. They made it look like it was like halfway to a human being and human feet. No. The Littlefoot, the one I showed you a few minutes ago, that's the most complete Australopithecus specimen known, and it's got an age to it. That's what 8 feet typically look like. So it wasn't evolving toward humans in any way. It was just an age. And then that's an Australopithecus skull, a modern human skull. They don't look very much alike. Is there anything that you could Australopithecus was look like? Yeah. Bonobo, the living bonobo. They're extremely similar. So if you go to the zoo in Columbus, Ohio, they've got some bonobos there. But it's not an ape-man, is it? It's just a different type of chimpanzee. They just spend a fair amount of time walking up there. So if you look at the Australopithecus, then you compare their bones to humans and other apes. You see the typical apes. The ribs are rounded, which is typical of apes, rather than flat like humans. The rib cage is pretty much cone-shaped instead of barrel-shaped with humans. The wrists are not flexible with radiation of gorillas. They walk on their knuckles, they can't flex their wrists. And in the inner, we've been able to do magnetic resonance imaging and CAT scans and CT scans that you can interfere. You don't have to break the thing apart. And I found out that in the balance mechanism is typical of apes, very different from humans. And then there's another one who made it where it's artificial. Well, this one was discovered in 1994, but they never talked about it until 2009. So the fragments were spread out over almost a mile. 8 feet out of the base of the skull was found 550 meters away. And then arm bone fragments found 270 meters away, several football fields away. The only reason that it's a big deal is it's found in lower rock, which is considered older than the previous specimen, and it's not all human. It's translated an extinct ape, pretty typical of apes. In fact, it was the first called Australopithecus, and somebody said, no, I need to publish, so let me do it in the same color other parts of it. It's still the first, Okay. So, so I wanted to point out, previously I mentioned in the Paleocene there's no primates, in the Eocene we have lemurs and stuff like that. In the Oligocene we have the first monkeys, and in the Miocene we've got a lot of monkeys. None of those are considered human ancestors. There's a jump again between what is in the community of fossils that is in the Miocene to the Pliocene. And these are the ones which are sometimes here, Pliocene and Pleistocene, will cost the human ancestor. Australopithecus, Lucy, we hear that that's the human ancestor, and Ardipithecus is a variation of Australopithecus. But the professional paleontologists admit these are too far committed in the direction of apes. They couldn't be human ancestors. So none of these is the LCA, the last common ancestor. We don't know what the LCA is of any of the groups of fossils or the living types. So here's the other candidates for human ancestors down to the years. One of them is called Homo habilis, which means hand-use man. The reason it was given that name, it was first discovered in 1959 in Kenya at the Olduvai Gorge. And the discoverer, Louis Saliki, considered it in the human genus Homo in human, not because of its anatomy, because there were tools found in the body. So Homo habilis means hand-use man. Humans able to use their hands. Yeah, but what happened a few years later, 13 years later, at the same location, at a lower level, they found undisputed human fossils, Homo sapiens. So that would make it kind of hard for these to be recruited with control from humans are the only ones known to actually manufacture food. Now, chimpanzees will use a stick to reach into a termite mound to get the termites out, but they don't really make food. Humans make tool hammers and stuff. So, even though this is called Homo habilis, it's found in the same place as Homo sapiens. And if you compare the Homo habilis skull up above the nostril tip of the skull, the nostril tip. Okay, now Homo habilis, though, there's actually two groups of them. One group is very ape-like. Remember I mentioned before about lumpers and splitters? There are people that will lump them together and put them both in the same species. I would tend to be a splitter on it, because the best known Homo habilis skull, ABBASeminar012722Apemen PwrDirector, so you see where fossil is. Okay, this one is only like 2/3 of the brain capacity of the smallest human being. So I would say, no, that's definitely not so good. This is about the average size of enough. There's another one that was put into Homo habilis, but its brain is over 750 cc's, which is within the size of a human, and you can see the skull is considerably different. So this one's called Homo habilis, okay, Homo habilis. Anyway, called Homo habilis. This one seems to actually be human. You've got to look at stuff like the measurements to figure out which one was it. So the KNMPR1470 is considerably larger than any of the Australopithecines there is in any between. The only other candidate left besides Homo habilis is Homo erectus. Homo is human, and we're Homo sapiens, which is wise and intelligent human. But there's another one called Homo erectus, which is upright human. Homo erectus is being found in China, in Indonesia, in Kenya, Tanzania, Hungary, and Australia. And every one of the skulls of Homo erectus is within the range of human size, human brain size. So some creationists think it's an unknown type of ape-like, which is most of these. So there's no different ethnicity, what we could call a race, a different ethnicity of Homo sapiens. And everywhere Homo erectus has been found, so the modern type human skeleton has been found. So rather than being an ancestor of Homo sapiens, it lives at the same time and the same place. So Homo erectus falls within the range of humans. What qualifies someone to be a human being? And he's writing a book about it. Who has written most of the books about humans down through the years? Europeans and Americans. So if you want to be human, you better look like me. Okay. Well, the authors use their own ethnicity as a defining example of Homo sapiens, but I've been in 35 countries around the world, and I've seen a bunch of ethnicities of the Quechuas, the Tamils, the Canaras. Here's an artist reception in Java man, and we don't know anything about the North. No, but the rest of them, I've seen a bunch of people around the world that look like that, but they don't look European. So therefore, they've been excluded from being Homo sapiens. So the people are reversible. No, they're fully human in every way. So what we call Homo erectus is probably just humans to non-European people. And then there's another one, Homo erectus. Again, we don't know anything about the nose that we saw, but it falls within the range of measurements of Homo erectus. We fall within the range of measurements of Homo sapiens. The height, the size of the cranium, and so forth. All the same. So Homo erectus is just a form of Homo erectus, which is just a form of Homo sapiens. So this is called the carnivore. It's found in Kenya, so it's about 40% complete skull. Of course, they fill in the rest based on imagination. But the brain size within this was within the range of human beings. In fact, it's considerably larger than Homo erectus. It's like 1,000 cc. So it's estimated to be about 5 feet 4 the time of his death. It's not an ape-man. It's not an ape-man transmission. This is one of the best known ones. They're manifold. Okay, Homo heidelbergensis. This is another one that's proposed as a possible homosexual human, but it's well within the range of measurements of human. Does everybody have the same skull measurement, height measurement, arm measurement? No, there's a lot of variations. Within the 7 billion living people, well, when you had some of the people for the top, this is all from the Pleistocene. This is what I think all creations consider post-modern time. It will probably vary in local capacities, possibly during the ice age, and in caught in snowstorms and stuff like that. The ice age is only a couple hundred years after the Tower of Babel begins to spread out. So Heidelbergensis is within the same range as Neanderthal. Boy, is a Neanderthal an ape-man? It's named the Neanderthal in Europe. Some of them had unusual skeletal features. The very first Neanderthal skeleton ever found, when it was put back together, and so it was put out there as if it was some kind of ape-man, some sort of a primitive being that had an fully evolved gene. But later on, the medical doctors went back and examined it and found that this skeleton had arthritis and liver. The human being was diseased. But most of the Neanderthal skeletons are not like this. They did have some unusual characteristics. They had, in general, they were bigger, stronger, had bigger brains, and also had somewhat protruding eyebrow ridges, and the jaws tended to jut out some. But if you want to give an example of what a Neanderthal would look like, picture Andre the Giant. Then it was Andre the Giant was, Pinter's life. But he had a condition called acromegaly. It was really the same symptom. So on average, the Neanderthals were bigger than modern humans. Bigger bones, bigger brains. They were physically superior in every way. And we also know a lot about them because they buried their dead. And not only did they do that, they did paintings and things like that. So they seem to have had some culture, and we learned a little bit about it. So back in 1960, before we had that many Neanderthal bones, an artist Wilson made them like that. And later on, and also he said, that must be what the better was like. Since then, we discovered a whole lot more. That's a Neanderthal skull from the cradle of human time to do over in the country in South Africa. And it's human. And this is the latest artist conception of what a Neanderthal skull looks like. Is that anybody? No, we don't know anything about the hair or the soft parts like nose and ears, but it's human. In fact, I have a cousin that looks a great deal like that. I've never actually told him that. But you'll see people that look like that walking over you, right? Anybody else looks a little like that? Yeah. That's what Neanderthals are now believed to look like, and they were bigger than us, stronger than us, bigger brains than us. Okay, well, what? They're cavemen. What does it take to be a caveman? You gotta be a what? And you're gonna what? Yeah, there's still cavemen living over in Israel. There's a lot of hills with a lot of caves and so forth, and people live in. Oh, there's a man who lives in a cave. A cave living. So, unusual living arrangements have nothing to do with evolution. Okay, well, is Neanderthal DNA much different from human DNA? We haven't been able to get a whole lot of Neanderthal DNA from the fossils. There's mitochondrial DNA, and out of 16,500 base pairs, there are only 279 and out of the DNA of the nucleus, the Neanderthals, about 99% similar to fossils on human beings. How about Cro-Magnon? You ever heard of Cro-Magnon now? No. There's another one that's supposed to be this was the artist's conception when the Neanderthal was painted to look like an ape. Florian the Cro-Magnons, humans look like a pretty typical modern human. They were physically superior in every way to modern humans. They were sophisticated in culture. They did elaborate creative art, tools, and so they even painted themselves sometimes. With a cave in Lascaux, France, they were able to figure out how to make troops that would last for thousands of years. You can do that. You think the house you can't figure away. But in the cave at Lascaux, some of the Cro-Magnons painted themselves. So you can see those, a man showing two boys how to use both. And there's a very odd-looking fork behind it that's pretty similar to something called the further ball sequel. There are horses that look kind of like that. And so these two guys down in the middle, we're not sure what they're doing. They don't explode, they all look fancy too. They look like that. Now, Cro-Magnon is considered physically superior to modern humans in every way. Put them in the Olympics, they probably win. Put them in a business, they probably become the chairman of the board. So, that's the Neanderthals were fully human, Cro-Magnons were fully human. And then here's a very recent one from about 15 years ago, Flores man, Hobbit. Well, every few years the news media talk about they finally used ape-men, ape-men. This was found on the islands of Flores, Indonesia, and specimens were less than 4 feet long. Well, you know, there's ethnic groups that are small pygmies of Africa. And so, analyzing the bones, nothing more than a group of pigs. They were doing it everywhere. What other ape-men do we have? So, if we evolved from someone considered with apes, the transition should have taken millions of years, we should find a tremendous number of ape-men. How many ape-men fossils did we find? Not many, none at all. So humans were created as humans, and apes were created as apes. We could find distinct groups with no connection. How many connections did we find? No connections. So all the humans in the fossil record, meaning all the apes in the fossil record that we can find sufficient fossils for, we claim that that's a monkey. We don't see anything that rapidly changes as a monkey. We have distinct groups in the Eocene, Algocene, Miocene, Pliocene, Pleistocene, which gets to the concept of ecological community defining. So the rock layers don't represent time periods. I'm not going to go into the building system today, but the rock layers are identified by a characteristic response, which is what we see in the old. So what are the fossils tell us about evolution? The fossil apes, fossil men, no fossil or living first men. So logically, it still looks like evolution using concept. So what would be the best explanation for where human beings used? So let's make man in our image. So you were not involved in it. You were part of the separate creation God made, starting in Adam, and then you took Eve out of Adam. But you got your DNA from the mom and dad. You got it from the mom and dad, you got it from the mom and dad, you got it from the mom and dad, all the way back. And ultimately, all human DNA came from Adam and Eve, where you get first. So, there's so much extra capacity for information stored in DNA. You could put enough in one individual, it's not expressed in that individual, that you could make billions of distinct descendants later on. So what does that mean about you? Where did you come from ultimately? Adam's DNA. That means when God was creating Adam, he was thinking, you know, in a few thousand years, I'm going to want to screw you. God is coming in you and creating Adam. That's pretty cool. He was thinking of me. That's what you're going to do. Well, are there any questions?
So, Neanderthals, would they be considered descendants of Adam as well, even though they're still,
Yeah, all human beings, came from Adam, and then at the time of the flood, everybody, Noah's family died up. And so a lot of creations like these, since we don't find humans only later below the Pleistocene, because those were from the flood, and the Pleistocene would have been after the flood, and that would be the Neanderthals. When people began to spread out from the Tower of Babel, that's when the Ice Age set in, and it was a harsh climate. And so people would go, and they didn't have a whole lot of buildings and so forth. They would just set up their communities, and a lot of times it's associated with a big place to stay. But the Neanderthals were just post-flood descendants of Noah and his family. Yeah.
The other thing you have, like, discovered, because you said if you discover something new, you just know. Is there anything you have discovered?
No. The only places I've gone out actually dug down was in Texas, Africa, and Wyoming, and there's already names for stuff. Okay, I'm going to help excavate this at a mouse well, it's already got one. But if you're the very first one to find it, you can think it up yourself. Like Harold Cook discovered a tooth in Nebraska, and he called it after Harold Cookie Eye. And this guy, Mark Godenosis, was the species name or something like Mark Godenosis, he discovered it. And he didn't name it. He found it. Okay, I'll be able to stop recording now.